Have you ever felt like you were trapped? Like you were standing at the edge of something great, but a wall was standing in your way? Maybe that wall is fear, doubt, or even failure. Maybe it's something someone said to you years ago, and it's still echoing in your mind. You're not enough. You'll never make it. Let me tell you something right now. Those boundaries are not your truth. God didn't create you to live small. He didn't create you to stay stuck. You were made to move forward, to rise above, to break through. Today, we're not just talking about breaking boundaries. We're stepping into the kind of faith that moves mountains, the kind of vision that looks past obstacles and says, with God, all things are possible. Too often we let the world define what we can or can't do. But listen, when God is your source, the boundaries that stop others can't stop you. The Bible says in Isaiah 55:8-9, my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways. What does that mean? It means the things you see as limits, your lack of resources, your lack of confidence, your past mistakes, God doesn't see them the way you do. What you see as a wall, God sees as a window. What you see as an end, God sees as a beginning. Sometimes the boundaries we see are not physical, they're mental. Proverbs 23:7 says, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. What are you telling yourself about who you are? Are you saying, I'm not qualified? Or are you saying, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me? Are you focused on what you don't have? Or are you trusting in the one who has no limits? Let me ask you, what would happen if you stopped looking at what's in front of you and started looking up? What would happen if, instead of saying, this is impossible, you said, God, I trust you? Let me tell you, faith shifts your perspective. It's like seeing a mountain from a different angle. You realize it's not as big as you thought. Faith without works is dead. You can't just sit and wait for the boundary to move itself. You've got to take a step. Do you remember the story of Peter walking on water? Jesus didn't say, stay in the boat and I'll bring the miracle to you. He said, come. That means you've got to move. You've got to take that first step, even if the water looks deep. Maybe your first step is applying for that job, starting that business, forgiving that person, or sharing your testimony. Whatever it is, know this. When you step out in faith, God meets you there. He's not waiting on your perfection. He's waiting on your obedience. Breaking boundaries isn't always easy. Sometimes it hurts. Sometimes it feels like you're taking one step forward and 2 steps back. But hear me. The pain you feel today is the preparation for the promise God has for you tomorrow. James 1:2-4 says, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. The resistance you feel right now, that's not the end. It's God strengthening you, shaping you, and preparing you for what's next. When you feel overwhelmed, remember this. You're not facing those boundaries alone. Deuteronomy 31:8 reminds us, the Lord himself goes before you and will be with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Picture that. The God of the universe is not behind you, waiting for you to figure it out. He's ahead of you, clearing the path. So why would you let fear or doubt hold you back when the one who moves mountains is leading the way? Your words have power. Proverbs 18:21 tells us, death and life are in the power of the tongue. What are you speaking over your life? Are you speaking defeat or are you declaring victory? Stop saying, I can't, and start saying, I will, because God is with me. Stop saying, this is impossible, and start saying, God makes all things possible. Speak life over your situation. and watch how God begins to work through your faith. The enemy wants to convince you that you're not enough, that you're too broken, too flawed, too far gone. But let me remind you of who you are. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. You are a child of the Most High King. You are chosen, loved, redeemed, and called. When you know who you are, no boundary can hold you back because you're not walking in your own strength. You're walking in the authority of Jesus Christ. Sometimes we try to break through boundaries on our own, but God didn't design us to do life alone. Ecclesiastes 4:9-10 says, "Two are better than one, because they have a good return for their labor. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up." Surround yourself with people who remind you of God's promises, who pray with you, who encourage you to keep going. Together we can do so much more than we ever could on our own. I want you to hear this loud and clear. Your breakthrough is closer than you think. The boundary that looks so big right now will seem small when you look back and see how God brought you through it. Don't give up. Don't settle. Galatians 6:9 says, "Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up." Keep pressing, keep believing, and watch how God turns your boundary into a breakthrough. Fear is often the loudest boundary we face. It whispers, "What if you fail? What if you're not good enough?" But let me remind you, fear is a liar. The Bible says in 2 Timothy 1:7, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind." When fear shows up, speak back to it with faith. Say, "I am not afraid because God is with me. I am not weak because His power is made perfect in my weakness." When you replace fear with faith, boundaries lose their power. Maybe you've been praying for a breakthrough, but it feels like nothing is happening. Let me tell you this: God is not silent and He is not absent. The waiting season is not a wasted season. Just like a seed planted in the soil, God is working beneath the surface. Romans 8:28 reminds us, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him." Trust that the delay is part of the process. Sometimes God isn't just preparing the breakthrough, He's preparing you for it. Let me ask you, are your dreams big enough? Or have you shrunk them down to fit within the boundaries of your comfort zone? God didn't create you to live a life of mediocrity. Ephesians 3:20 says, "He is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine." That means your dreams should scare you a little because they remind you of how much you need God to accomplish them. Don't settle for small dreams. Dream bigger, pray bolder, and trust that God will take you further than you ever thought possible. So here's my challenge for you. Stop looking at the boundaries and start looking beyond them. Stop listening to the voice of fear and start listening to the voice of God. He's calling you higher. He's calling you to break free. And the good news, you don't have to do it alone. The same God who parted the Red Sea, who tore down the walls of Jericho, who raised Lazarus from the dead, that same God is with you right now. Father, I pray for everyone watching this. I pray for boldness, for courage, for vision. Help them see beyond their boundaries and step into the life you've called them to. Break every chain, tear down every wall, and remind them that with you, all things are.